Dear friends, once again, welcome to this section of the background of the English poetry. Initially, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Futke Surekan Narendra. I have been working as an assistant professor in Punneshloka Ahilyadevi Holkar Mahavidyalaya, Rani Sarwar, since October 2005. I have had an experience of teaching of last 15 years. With the help of that experience, I am going to deliver a lecture. The origin and the background of the English poetry can be traced back to the history of the English language. Also, the study of English language is conveniently divided into three phases as we have frequently seen: Old English, Middle English, and Modern English period. Similarly, the history of English poetry too can be divided into these three periods: during the 5th and the 6th century AD, that is after the death of the Jesus Christ, the German tribes, Angles and Saxons, popularly known as the Anglo-Saxon, invaded Britain along with the Jutes, Angles, settled in the East Anglia, the Saxon in the southern part, and Jutes in the Kent. They struggled with the Britons and later on assimilated with them and became part and parcel of the land. They changed the language and culture of the most of the parts what becomes England. This land, known as Ingla land, later on becomes England and English as its language. The terms English and England originated from further curbing of the name Anglion, a small area in the northern Germany. The Angles and Saxons were taught to read and write by the Christian missionaries who came to England during the 6th century. Since the missionaries and the clerics were literate and learned people, the early or the Old English poetry was written by them and the themes were religious in nature, relating to the Christian ideology. Beowulf by an anonymous poet and some poems by Cinewolf are the earliest examples of the English poetry. However, the English language of this period is very different from the Middle or the Modern English, and it requires a special study of Old English for the understanding of the English poetry. The first poet, which is very important one for this section, is Geoffrey Chaucer. He is also known as the father of English poetry. The history of English poetry begins with the great 14th century poet Geoffrey Chaucer. He was born in 1340 and died in 1400. Historically, he belongs to the Middle English period. His treatment of the English language in general and literature in English owns him the title like the father of English poetry and the father of English language too, because from his poetry actually the language actually becomes a developed one. During the times of Chaucer, Latin was considered as a standard language. It was the language of the learned and elite class like clergymen and the men of letters, whereas English was considered as a language of the vulgar. The word vulgar in those times simply meant common people. Common peoples of England uses the English and the learned people uses the Latin language. English was the language of common people. So the word English was not considered as a standard language to be used for the schooling, instruction, administration, or literature at that point of time. It was Chaucer who started writing poetry in the English language. He was a learned man and had studied the language Latin. He was a civil servant and traveled a lot throughout the Europe as a part of his duties and responsibilities as a government servant and statesman. He employed this knowledge into his poetry. Since he wrote poetry in the English language, he contributed numerous words and expressions to this language. So his contribution to this language is very immense. He is a he took English as a dialect and made it into a language. He is known as one of the important maker of the English. Along with the contribution to the growth and the development of the English language, Chaucer is credited for his noteworthy contribution to the development of the English poetry. He modernized English poetry by introducing the human elements and the characters in his poetry. Instead of religious aspect, Chaucer chose to depict the contemporary issues of his times. The greatest work of Chaucer is the Canterbury Tales, approximately written in the 1385. As the title indicates, this poem is a collection of 24 poems, and all these poems are titled as the tales. These are the stories. For example, Miller's Tales, Night Tales, and so on. The Canterbury Tales depict the social, political, religious, and economic life of the contemporary England. The characters narrated their stories and reveal various aspects of the English society. In brief, we can say that Chaucer's contribution to the English language is very significant one, as he contributed new words, new phrases to this word, this language, that is the language of common man. Previously, as we have discussed, that this was not the language of the learned people. Learned people uses the Latin language, whereas the common people uses the English language. So English is developed role under this great poet. That's why he is known as the father of English poetry. After the Geoffrey Chaucer's contribution, so we have to see the Elizabethan period. That is the next important phase in the English poetry, Elizabethan poetry. However, England of the 16th century was torn by the religious tensions between the Protestants and the Catholics. So that was the strife between these two sections of the religious factions. When Elizabeth became the Queen of England in 1558, she tried to establish peace and harmony in England. The English sailors were exploring new lands for trade. So, as we have seen from the earlier school days, so the English peoples were exploring the new lands of the world, and for that purpose of the trade, so they entered into the various lands also. England was becoming economically strong under the reign of Queen Elizabeth. This led to the growth of the art and literature also. Moreover, the Elizabethan period was influenced by the Renaissance, known as a reawakening of the knowledge or a rebirth of the knowledge, and the Reformation movement in the Christian religion. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth, poetry and drama flourished. Sir Thomas Watt and Henry Howard, also known as the Earl of Surrey, introduced sonnet to the English poetry. Actually, these two poets were deployed on a diplomacy to the Italy. But they came into the contact of this type of the poem, that is sonnet, Petrarch. They have studied, so they influenced by the poems of the Petrarch, and the same poems were introduced in the England, but the treatment was their own. The great poets of the Elizabethan period are Edmund Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney, and William Shakespeare. Edmund Spenser is known for his long allegorical epic poem, The Fairy Queen in 1590. His poem is divided into six books and tells about the adventurous stories of the legendary king Arthur and his 12 knights who go in search of the Holy Grail. The knights represent the private virtues like holiness, temperance, chastity, friendship, justice, and courtesy. And King Arthur represents magnificence. Spenser's other notable poems are The Shepherd's Calendar in 1579, Amorti, a sonnet sequence in 1595, Epithalamion, a poem written on the occasion of his marriage with Elizabeth Boyle. So that is also a very significant poem as far as Elizabethan poetry is concerned. Epithalamion. He wrote on his marriage occasion with the Elizabeth Boyle. Actually, Elizabeth Boyle he courted for a long time, and later on that love was actualized or realized in the form of marriage in 1595. And both Halimian, a poem written on the occasion of the wedding of the daughters of the Duke in 1596. Along with poetry, Spenser contributed a special stanza form to English poetry that is named after him as a Spenserian stanza. This is the stanza of the 9 lines with the rhyming scheme of A B A B B C B C then C. The stanza has 8 lines with the iambic pentameter and the last line is in the iambic hexameter. The Spenser used this stanza form in his poems including The Fairy Queen. Sir Philip Sidney is another great literary figure of the Elizabethan period. Sidney, in his poem An Apology for Poesy or A Defense of Poesy in 1595, he is known for his sonnet sequence also, Astrophel and Stella in 1591, addressed to Penelope Dure. So that is also one of the sonnet sequence. William Shakespeare, famously known worldwide for his classic plays, is also known for his poetry, especially 154 sonnets and 5 long narrative poems, Venus and Adonis in 1593, The Rape of the Lucre in 1594, The Passionate Pilgrim in 1599, The Phoenix and the Turtle in 1601, and A Lover's Complaint in 1609. He introduced a new pattern of the sonnet to English poetry, known after him as the Shakespearean sonnet or English sonnet. The Italian sonnet or the Petrarchan sonnet was introduced by the poets like Sir Thomas Watt and Surrey in England, and had 2 parts, octave and sestet, as we have seen in the last part. Shakespeare wrote sonnet with the 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. Those are known as the quatrain, and the heroic and a final couplet, which is that is known as a concluding couplet, which and was intellectual in nature. Due to this contribution to literature, Shakespeare is honored as a bard of Avon. So that was the term which is called him as in an honor. And due to the growth of poetry in the Elizabethan period, Elizabethan England is known as nest of singing bird. So with this, we comes to an end of this section. Thank you.